On the day we were supposed to get our marriage license, my girlfriend, Sarah, said she was busy and didn't show up again. When I got home, I found a wedding certificate of hers with the mail. The wedding date was today. I laughed, put the certificate on my desk, and immediately decided to end our relationship. The next moment, Sarah called me. Her voice sounded annoyed. "Mark, what's your problem? Aren't you too old for this drama?" Just as I was about to say something, I heard her assistant crying on the phone. "Lisa, did Mark misunderstand us? You should go home. I can manage on my own. Don't worry about him. Always the same tiresome story with him. Right now, you're what's important," Sarah said in a comforting tone. After the call ended, I knew it was over. As I was packing my things to move out, Sarah walked in with her assistant, Tom, who looked like he was about to faint. "Mark, get some sugar water quickly. Tom just fainted from low blood sugar," Sarah ordered, focused entirely on Tom and not even looking at me. I looked up but didn't rush to welcome her back like I used to. Instead, I kept packing. Seeing that I wasn't reacting, Sarah finally looked up with a frown. "Mark? Can't you understand people talk?" She seemed surprised when she saw what I was doing. Then her face changed as she quickly came closer. "Mark, what are you doing? Are you seriously thinking of breaking up with me?" Without stopping, I casually replied, "Is breaking up a joke?" "You?" Sarah seemed lost for words, glaring at me coldly. "What I mean is, you're the one bringing your husband home. I better make some space for him," I said sarcastically, glancing quickly at Tom. "Mark, what do you mean? I don't get it," Sarah stammered, looking visibly nervous and avoiding my eyes. I scoffed, tossing the marriage certificate at her. "Sarah, are you serious? Can't own up to your actions?" Seeing the two marriage certificates, she panicked, yelling in frustration, "Mark, what kind of tricks are you playing? How did this get into your hands?" I smirked, not bothering to answer. In the tense silence, Tom spoke up in a tearful voice. "Sarah, I sent it to the wrong place. It's my fault for arguing with Mark because we got married." He started sobbing. "Tom, it's not your fault," Sarah quickly said sympathetically, walking over to Tom protectively. "Now that you know, I won't hide it anymore. Tom was diagnosed with late-stage stomach cancer a couple of days ago. He doesn't have much time left, and his last wish is to marry me. You know Tom's been with me since he graduated, always helping me out. He's not just my assistant, he's a friend. When a friend is in trouble, I can't stand by, Mark. You can understand, right?" Sarah looked at me with hopeful eyes. I turned away dismissively. "He's your assistant, your friend, and your husband. Handle things with him. Talking to me won't help." Seeing my firm stance, she frowned again. "Mark, is this really necessary? How can you be so heartless? I've already said I'd marry you. Does it matter if it's sooner or later? Tom is sick. How can you be so cold to him?" Tom bowed his head, tears streaming down. I paused, looking at the two of them standing together. They did seem to be putting on a good show. I suddenly laughed. It did hurt seeing someone I loved taking care of another man, but our relationship was flawed, and I didn't want to be involved anymore. "Yep, I'm cold-hearted. I'll leave right away so he won't have to see me." I nodded and quickly left with my suitcase. As I passed Sarah, she grabbed me, her words sounding final. "Mark, just stop it. Apologize to Tom right now and we can forget all this ever happened." "If not?" I asked sarcastically, cutting her off. "Beg you never to ask me back? I'm supposed to apologize? Who is he to me?" Sarah's face fell, her voice ringing with warning. "Mark, enough. This is your last chance. Apologize to Tom. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning my back on you." In the silence, Tom tugged at Sarah's sleeve, acting all understanding. "Sarah, don't be mad at Mark. He's not wrong. It's all my fault. I'm the one who should go." Seeing this, Sarah let go of me and rushed to comfort Tom. I took that chance to walk out with my suitcase without looking back. Right before leaving, Sarah's cold voice echoed clearly behind me. "Mark, once you step out, don't expect to come back. I want to see what kind of life a loser like you can have without me." I paused for a moment, glancing back. It wasn't because I hesitated or had second thoughts. I just wanted to see clearly the woman I had once loved so much. Then, without hesitation, I walked away. Sarah had once been my dream girl and my only choice. She was always the high and mighty princess, and I was just an ordinary guy. We met in college, but sadly, our paths never crossed before then. I followed her schedule closely, whether she was going to class, eating, or taking walks. In the end, just to see her more, I decided to work hard and switched my major to be in her department. Until today, my biggest relief was having made that choice because it brought me closer to Sarah. Our professor said that if we didn't want to fail at the end of the semester, we had to form our own teams to analyze data for experiments. Despite being one of the top students, Sarah rejected everyone and asked to team up with me. I remember how thrilled I was then. Seeing her beautiful face, my heart raced and my cheeks turned so red they could boil an egg. Sarah rested her chin on her hand, looking at me with a twinkle in her eye, and said softly, "Mark, if you keep staring, the bell's going to ring soon." The classroom burst into laughter, and I snapped back to reality, feeling utterly embarrassed. But Sarah didn't mean to make fun of me. She quickly said, "Stop laughing. Teaming up with Mark is my honor." And just like that, Sarah and I got closer and closer. In the end, she was the one who confessed her feelings to me. We spent 3.5 wonderful years together. In college, we were the kind of couple everyone envied. Even though I was deeply in love, I never slacked on my studies. I maintained my full scholarship throughout, and even landed a job offer from a major international company after graduation. But Sarah was the only child in her family, so she had to go back home to take over the family business. Seeing her sad eyes, not wanting to part with me, I didn't hesitate to turn down a once-in-a-lifetime job and offered to join her at the company, helping her get started there. To avoid people saying I was using connections, I started from the bottom. Our relationship grew even stronger, and once I felt the time was right, I proposed to her. But each time she turned me down. When I asked why, she would just be vague. Later, I found out she already had Tom in her life. Tom was younger, more energetic, and knew how to make her happy. Gradually, our conversations shifted from talking about everything to just the little daily details she shared with Tom. I noticed the change, and I tried hard to fix things, but her heart had been elsewhere for a long time. No matter how I tried to convince her to stay, a single call from Tom would have her rushing to him, no matter the weather. She gave him all the care and patience she used to show me. All I got were cold looks and complaints. Even so, I couldn't let go, and I proposed once again. This time, she said yes. But on the day we were to get our marriage license, she stood me up for Tom. When I saw their marriage certificate, I knew it was finally time to face reality. When I went back to the old, run-down place my parents had left me, seeing their photos on the wall, I broke down and cried. After letting it all out, I tidied up, bought some necessities, and settled in. Lying on my childhood bed, my restless heart finally found peace. It was the best sleep I'd had in a long time, without worrying about Sarah's mood or whether she was eating and dressing well. In my dream, I saw my long-departed parents. I hadn't even begun to talk to them when the dream turned sour. Sarah was there, asking why I was so harsh with Tom. She pulled at my sleeve, insisting I apologize to him. Anger flared up in me, but then I was jolted awake by the shrill ring of my phone. I answered groggily, and Sarah's angry voice blasted at me. "Mark, where have you disappeared to? Did you forget today's company signing party? Everyone's got a date at and I'm left alone. Are you trying to embarrass me?" I snapped to full awareness, barely restraining my frustration as I held the phone away. "If that's what you think, sure." Mark! Sarah raised her voice. Then I heard her move, probably switching rooms. She sighed and softened her tone. Mark, it's a big day for the company. Can you stop playing games and come over? The signing starts soon, and we can talk everything over after the party tonight. There was a moment's pause in my resolve, as she spoke so reasonably. Before I could answer, I overheard people laughing and joking on her end. Wow, Tom looks like a groom today. Totally, he and Sarah really matched today. Tom's voice chimed in. Cut it out, I just threw this on. Seeing I was silent for too long, Sarah called me again. I scoffed. Sarah, isn't your partner already there? Don't call me again. Not letting her respond, I quickly ended the call because I knew if I stayed on the line any longer, I wouldn't be able to hold back my sadness. I didn't want to dwell on the past, but 5 years of memories were deeply woven into my life. All those days and nights I spent loving her, I never imagined what life without her would be like. The Sarah from back then would put me first, promising forever, but the Sarah now doesn't need me anymore. Tears dripped onto my pillow as memories startled me awake. I felt pain inside my heart, but before I could process it, there was furious knocking at the door. My first thought was that she was here, my body moving faster than my mind. When I opened the door barefoot, I realized just how foolish I had been. Mark, it really is you. You're back. The neighborhood committee lady was thrilled to see me, giving my shoulder an enthusiastic pat. Yes, ma'am, I'm back. Is there something you need? Yes, I got sidetracked there, she said, getting serious. Mark, you should come down and take a look. There's a bunch of black cars blocking the road for you, and our neighborhood already has narrow streets. The neighbors can't even come and go properly. I frowned and followed her downstairs. At the front, I saw Sarah's black car parked at the entrance. As soon as I showed up, the bodyguard opened the car door, and Sarah stepped out in high heels. I turned to leave, but behind me, Sarah called out sternly, Mark, stop right there! I ignored her and picked up my pace, but the next second, her personal bodyguard was blocking my way. Mark, what is this supposed to mean? Sarah caught up in her heels, giving me a slap before asking without a pause, You've gone too far. I turned away, not a trace of the love in my eyes she used to see. For a moment she looked stunned, then spoke coldly. Do you know I left a room full of guests just to come get you? Now hurry up. I didn't want to deal with her, but the small alley began to fill with curious neighbors. I didn't want to be the center of gossip. Even though I didn't want to be with Sarah, after weighing my options, I grudgingly got into Sarah's car in my pajamas. The backseat window rolled down, and there was Tom, all suited up, looking a bit guilty. Mark, sorry man, he said. I'm feeling a bit off, so Sarah had me sit in the back with her. Hope you don't mind sitting up front. Sarah appeared next, catching me glancing at Tom in the back seat. She seemed a bit awkward. She opened the back door for me, trying to ease the situation. Tom's not feeling too great, so I thought I'd take him for a drive. You don't mind, right, Mark? There's plenty of room back here for the three of us. I quickly shifted my gaze and slid into the passenger seat. I don't mind. Sarah looked a bit annoyed by my reaction, and although she opened her mouth as if to say something, she ended up staying silent. She slammed the back door and barked, Drive! As the car pulled away, curious neighbors followed with their eyes. Sarah's expression turned darker, and with a sharp tone, she said, I really can't believe people live in such a dump, wearing high fashion and coming to a place like this. Such bad luck. I gave her a hard look through the rearview mirror and remarked sarcastically, Sarah, if you're so above all this, maybe you shouldn't have come today. Tom, sensing the tension, spoke softly. Sarah, if me coming out is making Mark upset, maybe I should switch places with him. Sarah glared at me through the rearview mirror and said fiercely, You stay put. Let me see what he does to you. I acted like I didn't hear her, leaned back, and closed my eyes to rest up for the battle ahead. Since Sarah wasn't letting go so easily, I had to play my own cards. The car finally stopped at a hotel owned by the company. Still seething, Sarah got out as soon as the car came to a halt. Her bodyguard trailed closely behind me, making sure I wasn't going to leave. Tom approached me with a mocking grin as I slowly got out of the car. Gone was his usual meek demeanor, now replaced with arrogance. He blocked my path and sneered, "Mark, don't get too comfortable. Sarah's my wife now, and you're nothing but a side piece. Just watch, in the end, it'll be me standing next to her." "Congratulations then, Tom. Finally the underdog becomes the star," I said with a smirk, clapping my hands sarcastically as I brushed past him into the building. See, I knew today wasn't about me per se. The company was signing a deal with a top corporation that I had secured. The corporation's executives only wanted to deal with me. They made it clear that if I wasn't the one handling things, the deal was off. So Sarah had to suck it up and personally pick me from my old neighborhood to ensure the deal went through. Reaching the entrance of the banquet hall, Sarah met me again. She looked me up and down, unimpressed by my cheap pajamas, and sneered, "Is that what you're wearing? How embarrassing." Without another word, she dragged me backstage to a dressing room. She tossed me a suit matching her white dress and instructed the makeup artist, "Make him presentable and hurry up." I was like a puppet as they fussed over me. Looking at my reflection, I barely recognized myself. "Now you at least look human," Sarah commented sharply from behind, arms crossed. Her tone made me roll my eyes. Honestly, I couldn't care less about the facade, especially since this was my last night in her world. I was leaving her world after tonight, so what people thought of me didn't matter. Once dressed, Sarah brusquely linked arms with me and led me into the banquet hall. The moment we walked in, the lights came down on us. Conversations and clinking glasses stopped. I was dazed, feeling like we had inadvertently stepped into a wedding ceremony. My suspicion was confirmed the next moment. The host cleared his throat, commencing with a vow recital that wished love everlasting. He then announced the signing ceremony would follow Sarah's engagement event. By the time the host's voice faded, I finally snapped out of my shock. I tried to break free from Sarah's grip, but she held on tightly. "Mark, you better play along today." Her tone was full of unyielding warning. I scoffed and wrenched my arm free with all my might. As everyone watched in stunned curiosity, I calmly said, "This engagement is Sarah's little play, one I didn't consent to or know about. Sarah and I are over. She's already tied the knot with her assistant, Tom. I don't make a habit of wrecking homes." Finally, I solemnly declared, "As of today, I'm no longer with the company. From now on, I'll have no hand in any of its business." With a smile, I turned to Sarah and said, "I quit. The breach penalty is already in your account. From now on, we go our separate ways." Sarah was left speechless, staring at me in disbelief, clutching her dress in stunned silence. With that, I walked out. Seeing I wasn't joking, the clients shattered their glasses in anger and left, calling it a joke. The smaller invited company stayed, eager for gossip. As I reached for the door, Sarah finally snapped back to reality. She yelled orders at her men while running towards me. "Mark, stop!" Blocked again by her goons, I paused and turned back to her. Sarah tugged at me with a pout. "Mark, how could you? We had an agreement." Tom arrived then, watching the scene warily. "Sarah, I'm feeling ill. Could you stay with me?" She didn't spare him a glance, her eyes locked on me with hope. "Mark, stop messing around and don't be mad anymore, please." The scene fell into an awkward silence, with everyone holding up phones, recording like crazy. I kindly reminded Sarah, "But you're married." But she seemed like she didn't hear me, clutching onto me tightly. Suddenly, I lost my cool and sneered, "Sarah, you might not care, but I do. It was you who ditched me to marry someone else. I let you go, But now you're clinging to me like glue. What do you even want? It's not like that, Mark. I've always loved you. I'm divorcing Tom soon, and we'll get married right away. By now, Sarah knew I wasn't playing games. She started crying, her tears falling hard as she looked up at me hopefully. I stared back with no emotion, feeling my patience slip away. Once upon a time, a single tear from her would have made me feel guilty for days. But now, seeing her crocodile tears, all I felt was disgust. I calmly said, Sarah, you have no heart. Your new husband is staring at you, hoping you'd look back. But here you are, tangling with me in front of him. How humiliating for a man. As I spoke, I shot Tom a challenging glance. Sarah frowned tightly, signaling her bodyguards to remove him. No matter how he shouted, she didn't even spare him a glance, just kept crying, assuring me, Mark, you're the only one I want to marry. I messed up, and it won't happen again. Honestly, if the past me heard this, I'd have given her my all, but now I disgustedly shrugged her off. Your family's company is huge. You wouldn't want it ruined on your watch, right? If you don't care about the stock prices dropping, I don't mind bickering with you here. After that, Sarah finally released me, trembling, and I pushed open the door and hurried out. I didn't expect Sarah to chase after me. Her high heels were lost long ago, leaving a trail of bloody footprints behind her. I sighed silently and waited for my rideshare. As she saw me, she ran to me but halted when she saw my cold expression. Mark, I've thought it over. Nothing matters more than you. My dad can handle the company. She sounded sincere, and I got her hint. Seeing I didn't mock her, she cautiously reached out to hold my hand. Mark, my feet hurt, she said, tears welling up. I didn't respond, looking past her at someone behind her. Your real husband should be the one to console you, not me, your ex. Hearing this, Sarah got emotional, then calmed down. She boldly wrapped her arms around me. Mark, quit being passive-aggressive. I know I was wrong. I followed you out. Doesn't that show my love? I quietly looked into her eyes. Her love for me was no more. Like her privilege, she always had others spoiling her. She wanted to conquer my denial, but once I gave in, I'd lose all value to her. Your husband is watching. Go comfort him. It's not right to let him wear that heartbroken look. Look, I said. Sarah spun around. Tom came over and held her. Sarah, don't leave with him. Let's go home. Okay, I added. Sarah, don't do things you'll regret. You've chosen no turning back. From now on, I don't want to see you again. Maybe my repeated rejection hurt her pride. She pushed Tom aside to take his arm instead, glaring at me. Mark, you're the one who doesn't appreciate kindness. I was nice, and you didn't care, pushing me to anger. Fine, let's never see each other again. I'll see which company hires someone our company let go, she threatened, a shot back. Bring it on. The scene at the company banquet hit the top of trending searches that night. Somehow, my number got leaked, and reporters hounding for gossip called until my phone died. I blocked a bunch, but more calls came right after. I finally canceled our shared phone number at the store early the next day. Peace at last. Just when I wanted to live quietly, Sarah pulled another stunt. She blocked my neighborhood with 3 cars, threatening to stay unless I went with her. I wasn't scared of nosy neighbors anymore. I was worried the scene would draw reporters. Then my peace would be gone for good. I got in her car, seething. When Sarah saw me, her eyes brightened for a second, then went flat. I noticed it and watched her silently. Sarah, did you forget what you said before? Why are you here again? My tone was distant. She lowered her gaze. Mark, my dad's in the hospital and wants to see you. Gone was her arrogance from that night. I stayed silent. We reached the hospital in silence. Sarah's father looked pale, lying in bed. Papa? Sarah called softly from behind me, nervously twisting her fingers. He responded with a stern, just one syllable bursting with authority. I glanced at Sarah, noticing her nervous mannerisms. If it were before, I'd have held her hand, assuring her it was all okay. But now I just stepped aside, casually sitting on the leather couch, staring straight at the company's boss. "What is it? Let's get to the point." "I guess you're already aware of the company's stock plummeting," Sarah's dad said, still coughing into his hand. Even though he seemed weak, his tone was unmistakably firm. The caretaker next to him helped him with his back. Sarah wanted to step forward but hesitated, casting a desperate look at me for help. I calmly shifted my gaze and said casually, "Is Lisa's company giving yours a hard time?" Lisa was the owner of that leading company that only wanted my skills and was willing to sign a contract with me. Sarah's father, finally done coughing, replied, "Mark is a smart guy." I just smiled at that. I understood it clearly. Our company wasn't as powerful, and Lisa left them with no way to reconcile. Knowing Lisa's company held me in high regard, they decided to use me as their pawn from the start. I've been nothing but a tool for those in charge without any regard for my rights. If Mark agrees, my little girl's silly marriage can end, and he can have a happy life with her," Sarah's dad said. Sarah looked at me expectantly, tears shimmering in her eyes. I smiled back at her and said slowly, "Sorry, I don't take anyone else's leftovers." As soon as I said that, Sarah's dad furiously threw a cup at Sarah. "You're the cause of this mess. Don't you know your place? How dare you act up in front of me?" he barked, sneaking glances at me now and then. Blood streamed down Sarah's forehead, yet she stubbornly lifted her tear-stained face and looked right at me. Seeing her hurt, I remained calm as a lake. I didn't speak, just watched coldly and then sneered before turning away. Sarah's dad had never been ignored like this by someone younger. His long-time superiority now replaced by defeat. He leaped from his bed, raging and cursing readily. For the first time, Sarah disobeyed her father to run after me, sobbing, "Mark, there are no more obstacles between us. Do you really not want to marry me?" I was still fuming from her father's treatment. "Then get out of my way," I snapped. Sarah shook her head in pain, clinging to my shirt. "Mark, you've never treated me like this. Is there really no chance? I already divorced him. I only ever loved you." "But I don't love you anymore," I replied. "I don't believe it. I don't believe it, Mark. You loved me so much before, remember?" Sarah cried out desperately, confronting me. I pursed my lips, looking at her. "You realize that's in the past, right? The person I loved is long gone in my heart." My words stabbed Sarah deeply, like a thorn. She clutched her head, denying it repeatedly. Out of patience for her pleas, I pushed her away and turned to leave. Sarah fell to the ground, wailing and crying loudly behind me. With a frown, I walked off in long strides. After that day, I cut off all contact with Sarah. I didn't focus on the company's situation, but I eventually caught the news on TV. To appease an enraged Lisa's company, they had to pay high violation fees, resulting in massive layoffs to cut costs. Complaints filled the air, with negative news about the company pouring in from all sides. Without its foundation, the company was close to crumbling. During this crisis, honestly, I felt nothing. It was all Sarah's own doing. Just when I decided to go abroad for further studies, Lisa's company somehow got my number. A senior executive personally extended an offer. I admit it was tempting, but thinking about possibly facing Sarah at work, I declined. I contacted my old professor from college, asking about studying abroad. He was surprised, but also regretted that I had missed the chance at a big company job back then. In the end, he reassured me that it was never too late to try. "Mark, with your bright talent, you'll surpass me someday," he complimented. Living up to his expectations, I nailed the toughest admission exam and got into an Ivy League school abroad. My professor was so thrilled he called all my classmates from our year, planning a big reunion party. That's where I bumped into Sarah again. Seeing her caught me off guard. I froze for a minute. It was Sarah who broke the silence first. "Mark, long time no see." She approached with a smile, but it never quite reached her eyes. I looked down nervously, unsure of what to say. Sarah noticed my observation and laughed self-deprecatingly. "I must look awful now." "Not really, just a bit worn out," I replied honestly. Maybe my harsh attitude last time caught her off guard, because when I spoke calmly, her eyes turned red. "Mark, I thought you never wanted to speak to me again," she said quietly, stepping closer. I stepped back uneasily, frowning slightly. "Don't overthink it. As long as you keep your distance, I'm fine with being old classmates." My cautious retreat froze Sarah in her tracks, her eyes filled with a drowning sadness. Suddenly feeling annoyed, I ended the chat with, "Let's catch up later. You should get inside. The professor's already here." I tossed that over my shoulder and headed into the room. First, as I celebrated with classmates, the alcohol got to me. The professor, pleading exhaustion, left early. Everyone understood. He was giving us room to let loose. Conversations drifted from one thing to another. Eventually, everyone started talking about me. I laughed and answered each question. But when everyone started talking about how Sarah and I were a perfect couple in their eyes, I couldn't help but look a bit cold. I raised my glass and toasted to Sarah from a distance. Sarah is the daughter of the company's boss, and I'm not worthy of her, but I still want to thank her. Sarah is truly great. She taught me how to be an independent man. I downed my drink and then changed the subject. Let's talk about something else, so our beauty queen doesn't feel uncomfortable. Quite a few people knew we broke up, and sensing the awkward vibe, they laughed and helped steer the conversation elsewhere. But a few people who had once chased after Sarah and didn't know the details kept pushing us to play couple games. Seeing me put down my glass and stop engaging, Sarah jumped in. "Mark has had a bit too much tonight. Let's not do any games, let's just chat casually." People still wouldn't give up. Under their urging, Sarah came over to my side. I don't know who pushed her, but she ended up in my arms. Instinctively, I jumped up, but Sarah quickly wrapped her arms around my neck. She gave me a desperate look. The classmates started chanting for a kiss, and she moved towards my lips. At the last second, my patience was thin. I pried her fingers away and stepped back to create some distance. With a dark expression, I said, "Enough, Sarah. Others might not know our situation and joke around, but how could you not know?" Sarah bit her lower lip, looking at me pitifully. I ignored her, turning to everyone. "Sarah and I broke up a while ago. The reason is she secretly married someone else." Amidst their shocked reactions, I added, "Sorry, I've had a bit too much. I'm heading out." I couldn't stay in that suffocating space any longer, and pushed the door open and fled. I never thought Sarah would become so clingy. I started to miss the old her, the one who looked down on everything with pride. "Mark, can you stop?" I halted in my steps, speaking irritably. "Chasing after me like this only makes me dislike you more." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she softly said, "Mark, I know you're going abroad, and I know I can't keep you. I just want to look at you a few more times while I still can." I closed my eyes, swallowing all emotions, and said calmly, "I saw Tom's posts. Didn't you two reconcile? You even went to places we had planned to visit together. I'm happy for you." "It's not like that." Sarah stepped closer in her agitation, but upon seeing my cold expression, she lowered her gaze and retreated a step. "I've ended things with Tom completely. He wasn't sick. He lied to me. It's my fault. All my fault, Mark. I truly regret it." Her tears flowed silently, shoulders shaking. If I could turn back time, I would have held her and comforted her softly. Sadly, the past is beyond reach. Sarah, none of this matters to me anymore. Let me go, and free yourself too. On the day I left for abroad, it rained in the city. Dragging my suitcase, I walked into the airport and caught sight of Sarah from the corner of my eye. She was all suited up, following me, not too close, not too far. With a sigh, I entered the lounge. She sat right behind me, watching silently through her sunglasses. I pretended not to notice, put on my headphones, and waited quietly to board. Then, just before leaving, an unexpected call came. Boss, Mark, there's no need to be so formal. Isn't calling me uncle more familiar? Sarah's father's tone had lost its previous sharpness. I glanced at Sarah, then replied coolly, "We aren't that close. It's more polite to call you boss." Hearing my reply, Sarah gripped her white dress tightly. Noticing her small gesture in my peripheral vision, I stayed indifferent and said, "Mr. Lee, just say what you want to say." The line went silent. Then Sarah's father sighed deeply. "Mark, if I apologize now, would you give Sarah another chance?" In front of the 2 marriage certificates, she was completely panicked, angrily growling. "Mark, what kind of trick are you playing? How did you get this marriage certificate?" "You've been with Sarah for years. I admit I never thought highly of you, but I never intervened. Sarah has been pampered since childhood. I always thought she was just playing with your relationship. After all, you two aren't from the same social class. Ever since the breakup, the kid's been struggling, and her health's gone downhill. As her father, it's been heartbreaking to watch. If anything I did upset you, I'm sincerely sorry. I just hope you'll give Sarah another chance, remembering the good times you two had." I put my phone on speaker and stood up, looking at Sarah. "Since that's the case, let me make it clear today. Sarah and I are nothing more than strangers from now on. No other relationship at all." On the day I left, Sarah passed out crying in the airport lounge. She fell and her sunglasses came off, revealing her pretty face. All the guys rushed over to check on her. Seeing this, I deleted the emergency number off my phone screen and walked away with my suitcase. Even when I was in line to board the plane, I felt uneasy, worried those two might cause trouble again. It wasn't until I was seated on the plane that my heart finally settled. Looking out at the blue sky and white clouds, I felt a little bit of relief. After the plane landed, breathing in the foreign air, I suddenly had the urge to cry. Sniffling, I pushed aside my worries and walked over to the senior who came to pick me up. During my time abroad, I was absorbed in my studies, leaving no room for other thoughts. If it hadn't been for that late-night call from across the ocean, I might have completely forgotten Sarah. "Hello, Mark. Sarah just passed away. Before she died, she made me promise to contact you. She wanted to tell you, Mark, in the next life, I definitely won't miss out on you again." The call ended. I was dazed for just a moment, then I powered off my phone and went back to sleep.